Hi guys, this is a video solely for you beginners out there. So if you're an advanced player, switch off now. You're not going to find this too interesting. Well, you might, but I would bet against it. So this is a video about the alto sax versus the tenor saxophone. I'm going to describe to you the differences between the two of them, hopefully give you some guidelines if you're a beginner out there as to which one might be most suitable, most interesting for you. And I'm going to cut the tension straight away by demonstrating a little bit of alto and a bit of tenor and play some rather popular solos that you might have heard somewhere before. So there you go, that gives you some of the sort of characteristic differences in the tone between the alto and the tenor. I mean, you'll all know those solos, but how are they to play from a sax player's point of view? So that really takes me onto the kind of physical side of the alto versus the tenor. I mean, the glaringly obvious thing is that the alto is smaller than the tenor. It's obviously lighter than the tenor, so there's an immediate sort of physical advantage, if you like, for starting on the alto versus tenor, that you're not going to have to contend with the same weight around your neck playing the tenor as you would with the alto. So that's the first sort of most obvious thing to say. And then just as an extension of that sort of physical side of things, in terms of the air that you put down the saxophone, even though we use the same airstream to produce the sound on the alto versus the tenor, your air will just go further on the alto. If you like, if you were going to play, say, for half an hour on the alto and then you move to the tenor, it would just feel more physically demanding. You might get this sense that as you play any given phrase, the same phrase on the alto as you do on the tenor, that your air is running out more quickly on the tenor. And that's just because as we're blowing down a longer tube here, we need to fill up a longer cylinder. So it just requires more effort from this bit here, the breathing side of things, the diaphragm and all the rest of it. But otherwise, it is the same basic technique to play the two instruments, the same breathing technique, and crucially, it's the same fingering. So many of you kind of write in, phone up and ask the question, but if I learn on the alto saxophone at first for a year or so, do I not have to learn a completely new set of fingerings on the tenor? No, is the answer. The fingering is identical. The only difference is that the spacing, left hand to right hand, is further apart on the tenor than the alto. And even the spacing between the fingering is the same alto to tenor. So it makes it a very easy transition, if you like, if you're going to move from alto to tenor at a later date, which is very handy indeed. So that's the sort of big physical differences, really. Otherwise, I just sort of touched on it earlier, the breathing is pretty much the same, the airstream. It's just there's the sense that you use up your air more quickly. And the other key aspect, the embouchure, so this is our mouth position, how we set our lips and our kind of jaw position and all the rest of it, is broadly speaking the same from alto to tenor. You're going to have a slightly bigger mouthpiece in your mouth when you're playing the tenor, so the feeling is going to be immediately different. But basically speaking, we're trying to set a consistent embouchure from alto to tenor, but there is just a slightly tighter feeling, if you like, on the alto versus the tenor. And this isn't something that you try and force, it's just something that naturally occurs the more you play one versus the other. So I suppose what I'm saying is there's a very easy transition from alto to tenor and tenor to alto if you were going to swap about. But in terms of starting out, there are certainly some massive physical advantages to playing the alto rather than the tenor, in the sense that it's just lighter, a little bit easier on the air, and slightly cheaper on the pocket, on the money as well. So from that point of view, alto is the most popular beginner instrument, and the second one is clearly the tenor. Forget the soprano and the baritone right now for the sake of this conversation. But the other thing to mention is the key of the instrument. So the alto, being a small instrument, is higher pitched than the tenor. It's set in the key of E flat, the tenor is set in the key of B flat. So that means that the alto winds up 4 whole tones higher than the tenor. Now, I'm not going to get too technical on you at this stage, but if you were to play any given phrase, any set of fingering on the alto, and then you play the same thing on the tenor, it's going to come out 4 whole tones lower. That's something that shouldn't worry you as a beginner, because the whole thing about being a beginner is that you just need to get on and learn to play the instrument and enjoy the music coming out, regardless of what pitch is coming out, whether it's transposing down or up, as in these 2 transposing instruments. It's only kind of later on in life, when you're starting to play in bands and you're starting to communicate with other instruments where they might play in concert pitch, that you need to really think about the key and the pitch that's coming out. But initially, when you're learning, I mean, there's so much useful material out there, you know, tutor books and what have you, and they have all of this stuff transposed for you. So, you know, you learn a C major scale on the tenor, it's the same fingering as a C major scale on the alto, for example, but the pitch is just coming out differently. So you don't need to concern yourself with that element so much. So really then, when all that is said, it kind of comes down to your preference of the tonality between the alto and the tenor. If you don't have physical issues and you know, you're worried about the weight of it and all the rest of it, think about the music, think about the sound that you have grown up to love and that you want to emulate, because this is often the sort of the heart of the matter, the justification for people getting into the saxophone. You know, they've always heard the solo and they want to emulate that sound. So that's the reason I opened with those solos there, because people often phone up and they ask about Baker Street or Will You, these kind of solos, and they're wondering which instrument they're played on. So I played 4 little bits and pieces for you there. Baker Street, obviously alto. I played Take 5, that is an alto solo made famous by Paul Desmond. On the tenor, a little bit of Careless Whisper for you there. That is a tenor solo, even though it's in the upper part of the tenor range. And then I played some Pink Panther, which demonstrates that more kind of breathy, kind of sort of thick tenory sound that we know, that jazzy kind of sound that you get on the tenor. Now, of course, you can get a jazzy sound on the alto, but if I was to describe the 2 tonalities, I would say that the alto is a bit more focused and a bit sort of more pitchy and potentially sailing, particularly when you're up in the higher register of the alto. The tenor has a little bit more of a grit in the sound, and certainly a breathiness when you're playing it down low and with more of a jazz embouchure. So the kind of Pink Panther thing you heard me play there, I was using a kind of subtony embouchure technique. I won't get into that right now, and that gives you this kind of breathy jazziness in the sound. So hopefully that kind of gives you a demo of the, you know, the performance characteristics of alto versus tenor, because they are quite different beasts really, and you kind of need to know that when you're trying to inform yourself as to which decision to make as to whether it's going to be alto or tenor. So really that's it. I don't want to go into any more depth right now, but these are the basic differences that I've covered between the 2 instruments, the obvious physical differences and then the kind of musical differences, if you like. So I hope that was useful for you. Obviously, I may not have covered every aspect of alto versus tenor there, so if you have any questions, do email in. We've got our busy help desk. You can send an email to help@sax.co.uk, give us a call. And I suppose more importantly, really you need to try these things. You heard me playing them there, but if you can, get into our store and try an alto, try a tenor if you're a complete beginner. We welcome complete beginners, we encourage you, we try and help you out. I know some of you guys may be nervous if you're coming down to the store for the first time to try an instrument, but We've seen it all before. We don't mind. We want to help you out. So there we go. I hope that was useful for you, and we will see you on the next video. Cheers. So I hope that was useful for you. Rah, 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 rah. Ta-da.